In this video, I'm going to take you through the full XPM workflow in StructureGram. So that involves pulling in client data from XPM into StructureGram and visualizing it on a diagram. I'm also going to show you how you can create entities and relationships in StructureGram and push them back to XPM. That way both systems are always in sync. So I'm here on the groups page in StructureGram. Similar to XPM, all your data in StructureGram is organized into groups. So client groups. So the group that I'll be modeling today is this XPM group I've got called the Kelly demo group. So you can see that we've got some individuals, some companies, self-managed super fund, family trust. And I'm going to be bringing across that data and visualizing it in StructureGram. So to create a group in StructureGram, I just click this button up here and give it a name. Call it the Kelly group. And once you've got your XPM integration set up, you'll notice that there's this button on each group that says connect to XPM. So if I click this button, it'll take me to a page where I can now link this StructureGram group with the group in XPM. So from this drop-down menu, I can select the relevant group and then just click link. After a few seconds, I'll be taken to this page that's telling me that the two groups are linked, so they're ready to talk to each other. But no data has been synced across yet. So to pull the data in from XPM, I just click this pull data button. After a few seconds, I'll be taken to this page where I can review the entities and relationships that have been pulled in from XPM into StructureGram. So here we are. So we can see that 8 entities have been brought in, 9 relationships. We can click here to see the full pull details. But what's important to note here is that some entities and relationships need reviewing before they can be pulled into StructureGram. The reason why you'll need to review some entities and relationships is because, unfortunately, in XPM, you can't capture all the details that are relevant to particular entities and relationships. So, for example, in XPM, you can create trusts, but you can't select a trust type, at least by default. You could probably set up a custom field, but by default, you can't select a trust type. Same for relationships. So for example, we have a shareholder relationship. In XPM, you can put in the number of shares, but you can't select a share class. So we're just going to have to go down this list and make those selections. It's pretty easy. Just follow the prompts, and when it goes green, it means it's ready to be pulled into StructureGram. So I can select a share class here, or I can create a new share class if I want. So I'll just go down the list. It's pretty quick, and then we click continue pull. So now these entities and relationships that I've reviewed will be pulled into StructureGram. I might have to do this a couple of times. It shows about 5 per screen, but it's pretty quick. And after a few seconds, we'll have the whole structure in StructureGram. So once that's done pulling, we can now see that all of that data has been pulled across. And to double check that, we can go into these pages here on the left. So if I go into the individuals page, I'll see all of the individuals for the group here in this individuals entity page. And if I go to companies, we can see the companies, trusts, etc. So if I click on any of these entities, so for example, if I click on John, it'll take me to a page where I can see all of his information. So all of the details about him, his name, date of birth, but I can also see all of his related data, so the relationships that he has with other entities. So this is pretty similar to XPM, but what's different is you can also record any assets the entity owns, or loans, or leases, or distributions. So that's pretty handy, and I'll show you how that works a little bit later on. So now that we know that we've got our data in StructureGram, I can head over to the diagrams page, and now I can visualize this structure. So to do that, I just hit create ownership, give the diagram a name, and hit enter. So it'll automatically take me to the diagram canvas with the diagram already laid out for me. So in a couple of seconds, we'll see that diagram there. So we've got all the entities and the relationships, and it's been automatically laid out for me. So oftentimes the most time-consuming part of building a diagram is the layout. Figuring out where every entity and relationship fits can be quite challenging, especially for more complex structures. So the aim is to eliminate that entirely and just have it there for you. So you'll notice in this diagram view there are 3 buttons that are highlighted green. We've got the auto layout button, the entity filters button, and this green settings button over here. And I'm going to take you through each of them, because once you've mastered these three features, you'll be able to build diagrams very quickly, very easily. So the first button is this auto layout button, and I've just spoken briefly about it. All diagrams are automatically laid out for you. But if you click onto this button, within here you've got some options. So you can configure the auto layout depending on what works best for the structure that you've got. So if I click this bends button, for example, you'll see that the style of the diagram has changed slightly, and it's actually looks better than the original settings we had. So I'll just keep it on bends. You can also change things like the appearance of the links themselves. So right now they're rounded, but I can make them more rigid if I'd like. I'll just keep it at rounded. So the last thing to note here in auto layout is this direction of diagram flow. So right now it's going from top to bottom. So all of our relationships are cascading downwards. You can see all these arrows are pointing downward. But if I want to, I can make that bottom to top, or right to left, or left to right. So for some structures, a different diagram flow might look better. But for this one, we'll just keep it as top to bottom. So that's auto layout. The purpose of auto layout is to save you time rearranging diagrams by hand. It's all done for you. Okay. So the next feature is this settings feature over here, or the diagram settings. So right now this diagram has been laid out according to the default StructureGram settings. So what we see on the diagram and how we see the information displayed is according to those default settings. But we give you full control over what information is displayed and how it's displayed via these diagram settings here. So if you click on that button, this tab appears on the right hand side, or this panel appears with three tabs: the display tab, the entities tab, and the relationships tab. And I'll go through each of these. So on the display tab, you'll see options that are going to affect the appearance of the whole diagram. So here I can add things like a legend. I can also flick on this notes and annotations toggle, and that way I'll be able to directly annotate the diagram with lines, shapes, texts. I can show percentages, so ownership percentages on these labels, so now we can see them there. I can also create grouped entities. So this is an important concept to understand in StructureGram. The feedback we were getting was that when there was lots of different beneficiary relationships or member relationships, the diagram started to get quite cluttered. So for example, instead of having, so you would normally have 4 links from each of these beneficiaries to the family trust, and you can see that the diagram would get quite crowded with all of those links. So we introduced this idea of grouped entities, where we create a brand new entity which lists the names of the beneficiaries in the one node and just has the one link. So you've still got your individuals, but in terms of beneficiaries and members, which I'll show you in a second, you can just have it as a grouped entity with a single link, which keeps the diagram quite neat. So if I want to apply that for the SMSF members, I just click this group button here, and now we can see those member relationships have been grouped into this one entity. Okay, the last thing on this tab is this entity size and spacing. Pretty self-explanatory. This is where you can decide how large the entities are, so the shapes on the diagram, and the spacing between them. So you can go for a more compact look or spread them out if you like. The next tab is this entities tab. And this is where we get to decide what information about the entities gets displayed on the diagram. So right now I've got these ACN, ABN toggles on. I don't have any ACN or ABN information, that's why you can't see it. But if I did, it would appear within the entity here. I can also turn on things like the trust type or the company type. So now we can see it says discretionary where that trust is. You can turn on country flags if you've got country data, so that might be useful if you're modeling a multinational corporation. And you can also turn on FTE badges, so you can set up FTEs in StructureGram and have a little badge displayed on the relevant entity if you turn that toggle on. So that's entities, pretty simple. The next tab is the relationships tab. And this is probably the most important tab in diagram settings. And this is where we'll decide whether certain relationships are hidden, so they won't be seen on the diagram at all, displayed as a link, so as an arrow between entities, or in the relevant entity. So I'll show you an example. So I know that in this structure, I've got some director relationships. And at the moment, we can see that those relationships are completely hidden. But if I want to see that data, I can either choose to have those relationships displayed as a link, which might mean that the diagram gets a little bit cluttered, or alternatively, I could have them displayed inside of the relevant entity. So I'll select that option, and now we can see those director relationships displayed inside of those relevant company entities. Okay, so that's diagram settings. Purpose of diagram settings is so that you can control what data is displayed in the diagram and how it's displayed. Okay, so the last feature, or the last highlighted button here, is this entity filter button. So this is where we can decide what entities are going to be appearing on the diagram. So right now, and by default, all entities will appear on the diagram, but I can come in here and deselect certain entities that I don't want to show on the diagram. What's more useful though is this focus entity option, where I can select a focus entity and then only see the entities that are directly related or relevant to it. So for example, if I want to just see the self-managed super fund structure for this group, I could select this self-managed super fund entity, click direct links, and then when I apply this filter, I'll only see the SMSF structure and the relevant entities and relationships. So there we go. The reason why this is so useful is because combined with this duplicate feature, so I can create a duplicate of this diagram, I can then come back into this entity filter, this time select, say, the family trust, and model the trust structure for this group. So within 30 seconds, I now have an SMSF structure for this group, and now a trust structure, as well as the overall structure. So we've actually got 3 diagrams in a few minutes. So you can really iterate quickly on the diagram, and because everything's based on data, it's very easy to create different versions or different views of the group structure. Okay, so those are the 3 main buttons on diagrams. There's a couple of other handy features. We've got this scenario feature where you can use the existing structure as a base diagram and then build out a scenario in visual steps without affecting the underlying data. We also have this snapshots feature where you can enter a date and view a structure at a particular point in time. So StructureGram allows historical data to be stored. And if you've got that historical data, then you can view a structure at a point in time. So that's handy as well. So I'll just bring back all of the entities, and now I'll show you the second half of the XPM workflow, which is creating entities and relationships in StructureGram and then pushing them back to XPM. So I'll just create a few entities here. So I'll create a new trust, create a property trust. So you can select the trust type. So you can just build up a diagram this way by just dragging on these entities. It's very simple. We'll do a trustee company. And any entities and relationships that I create on the diagram are turned into structured data in these pages. So for example, if I go into this trust page, I can see this property trust that we just created on the diagram. And if I click into this property trust, I get taken to the entity page where I can see the related data. So we don't have any related data yet, but I wanted to show you how we can allocate assets to entities. So if I click this allocate asset button on this entity page, I can create a new asset, say maybe a commercial property, give it a name. You can select the method of ownership, add some values, and then hit create. And now in this entity page, we can see that this trust owns this asset. And if I head back to the diagram, that asset will now appear on the diagram as well. So there it is. So I'll just finish drawing the relationships on the diagram. So to draw relationships, you just click on an entity and draw a link to a target entity, and this tab appears on the right where I can select the relationship type. So these list of relationships will vary depending on the 2 entities that are involved. So from an SMSF to trust. These are the available relationship types. I can draw one from this company to a trust, so you can see that the list is slightly different. The trustee relationship. Okay, so I've got the entities, I've got the relationships, but what you might notice is that the auto layout button has now turned into this yellowy gold manual layout button. And this is just telling me that I've moved things around by hand. So an auto layout isn't currently applying because I moved these new entities on and drew these relationships manually. To apply the auto layout again so I can neaten this diagram, I just go up here and I can apply the auto layout, which automatically lays out the diagram neatly with those new entities and relationships. Okay, so now I'm going to push that data to XPM. To do that, I head over to the groups page. I come back to where that Connect XPM button was, and now it's a Manage XPM Sync button, so I click there. It'll take me to this page where now, as well as being able to pull data from XPM, I can now sync data across both systems. So this will involve a bit of push and pull depending on where the new entities are, and I can reconcile the two systems. So I get taken to this reconciliation page where I can review the differences. So first I'm going to review the differences in entities, and it's very explicit. So it's saying this property trust is not in XPM. We can see it's in StructureGram. It's not in XPM. Same with this company. It's not in XPM. It's in StructureGram. And so I can either decide to export those entities to XPM or delete them from StructureGram. Either way, the two systems will be in sync. So I'll just choose to export them. It turns green, which means it's ready to go. Now I can head to the relationships page where I can do the same for the relationships. Then finally, I can review all of the entities and relationships that I want to push to XPM. And then when I'm happy, click Apply Changes. So after a few seconds, those entities and relationships that I've created in StructureGram will now be pushed across to XPM. So the reconciliation is complete. And if I head to XPM and refresh my page here, we'll see that those new entities and relationships are now in this group in XPM. Just give it a bit of time to load. Cool. So we can see the property trust and the trustee company. If I click on one of these entities, we'll also be able to see the relationships that we created as well. So that's the full XPM workflow in StructureGram. It's pretty simple. You can pull client data in, it feeds in quite nicely. You might have to review some entities and relationships. Then you're able to quickly visualize that diagram with auto layout and then mess around with some of the diagram options to get the view of the structure you want. And then if you create any new entities and relationships in StructureGram, which is a lot quicker process to do that in StructureGram versus in XPM, then you can then push that data to XPM, make sure both systems are always in sync.